The construction of a new schoolhouse was well underway in San Diego, and the site buzzed with activity. Crisostomo Ibarra, determined to bring education to the town, had commissioned the building in honor of his late father, Don Rafael Ibarra. Today was an important day. The cornerstone of the school was to be laid in a grand ceremony. Ibarra had entrusted the construction to Ñor Juan, a local foreman who had the knowledge and skills to oversee the project. However, there was another man who had taken over much of the preparation for today, a mysterious yellowish-skinned individual, known to no one in particular, who had volunteered his assistance. This man had insisted on constructing an elaborate derrick, far more complicated than the simple tripod Ñor Juan had originally planned. The scaffolding was huge, over 8 meters tall, made of thick wooden posts and beams arranged in diagonal patterns. Cables stretched out on all sides, giving the structure a grand, imposing appearance. Colorful banners and garlands adorned the top of the derrick, making it look more like a festival decoration than a simple construction tool. At the heart of this massive apparatus was a large 3-wheeled pulley, used to lower a heavy block of granite into a trench below. This granite block had a hollowed-out space in the middle, where Ibarra intended to place a time capsule, an object containing newspapers, coins, medals, and other items of historical importance. These objects would rest inside the stone to be discovered by future generations. "I told you it would work, Ñor Juan," the yellowish man declared with pride as he turned the crank of the windlass, which lifted the granite block with ease. "Look at this. Even a single man like me can control the rise and fall of the stone inch by inch. A man down in the trench could fit the stones together, and I could manage it all from up here." Ñor Juan could only nod in admiration, though something about the yellowish man's smile unsettled him. The townspeople who had gathered to witness the event murmured in awe at the man's ingenuity. "Where did you learn all this?" Ñor Juan asked curiously, still marveling at the mechanism. "My father taught me," the yellowish man replied, his eyes glinting with a strange light. "And who taught your father?" "Don Saturnino, the grandfather of Don Crisostomo," the man answered, smiling in a peculiar way. Ñor Juan frowned. "I didn't know Don Saturnino." "Oh, he knew a great many things," the yellowish man interrupted, his voice taking on a darker tone. "Not only did he know how to beat his workers and leave them under the hot sun for hours, but he also had a way of waking the sleepers and putting the waking to sleep. My father taught me all of that. You'll see in time." As the yellowish man spoke, Ñor Juan felt a shiver run down his spine. Before he could ask any further questions, the arrival of a new figure drew his attention. It was Tasio the sage, a wise and eccentric old man who had wandered into the scene. Tasio muttered to himself as he examined the glass case that held the items for the time capsule. "Perhaps one day, when this building has crumbled into ruins and the memories of those who built it have faded, some distant future generation will find these objects. They'll study them, try to understand who we were, perhaps even laugh at our ignorance." He looked around at the bustling crowd, his eyes filled with a sad wisdom. "They'll speak of us as they do now of the ancient Egyptians. They'll say how barbaric they were. They still had kings and traveled to the other side of the world to solve local matters, as if a body needed to consult a head that was thousands of miles away." Ñor Juan overheard Tasio's musings and shook his head, returning to his work. The preparations for the ceremony were almost complete. Nearby, in 2 kiosks that had once served as classrooms for the local school, tables had been set for a feast. Food and fruits had been laid out for the school children, and not a single bottle of wine was present, only water and sweetmeats for the townspeople. Decorations of flowers and leaves added a festive touch. The crowd had gathered in full force, with bright clothes and parasols creating a lively scene. Boys scrambled up trees and onto rocks to get a better view of the ceremony. Parents smiled with pride, knowing that their children would soon sit at a table with a white tablecloth, like the curate or even the town's wealthy leaders. For these simple folk, such an event would be remembered for generations. Suddenly, the sound of distant music filled the air as the town band approached, accompanied by a procession of local dignitaries. The alcalde mayor of San Diego walked beside Ibarra, speaking in a friendly tone. "You can always count on my support for such a worthy project," the alcalde assured Ibarra. "If you need more funds, just ask. I'll see to it that the government provides." Ibarra nodded, feeling both excitement and nervousness as the moment of the ceremony drew near. His eyes fell on the towering Derrick, and he spotted the yellowish man looking back at him. For a brief moment their gazes locked, and Ibarra felt a strange unease. At that moment, Ibarra also noticed Elias in the crowd, standing near the Derrick. Elias, a mysterious figure who had warned him of danger in the past, gave him a meaningful look and a slight nod, as if to remind him of something. The ceremony began as Padre Salvi, the local friar, donned his robes and took his place to bless the cornerstone. The one-eyed sacristan held the book, and an acolyte stood ready with holy water. Padre Salvi's voice trembled slightly as he began to read the prayers. The glass case containing the time capsule was carefully placed inside the hollowed stone, and the alcalde stepped forward to make a speech. "People of San Diego," the alcalde began, his voice loud and commanding, "today marks a historic moment for our town. The cornerstone we lay here is not just for a building, but for the future of our children and the progress of our society. A school is the foundation of civilization." The crowd listened attentively, though not all of them fully understood the alcalde's grand words. "We must thank God for the blessings he has given us," the alcalde continued, "and for the government of our beloved Spain, which works tirelessly to bring education and enlightenment to these islands." After finishing his speech, the alcalde descended into the trench, ceremonially placing a trowel full of mortar onto the stone. One by one, the other dignitaries followed: the curate, the local officials, and even the wealthy landowner, Capitan Tiago. Each took a turn laying mortar on the stone. Finally, it was Ibarra's turn. At first, he hesitated, remembering Elias's warning, but the alcalde playfully shoved him forward. "Come on, Ibarra, we can't finish without you." With a slight smile, Ibarra stepped toward the stone. He took up a large iron trowel instead of the ceremonial silver one, drawing a few chuckles from the crowd. But as he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He glanced at the yellowish man, who was watching him closely, and then at Elias, who seemed tense and alert. Without warning, a loud crash echoed through the air. The massive derrick collapsed, its beams and cables crashing down into the trench with a deafening roar. Dust and debris filled the air as the crowd screamed in terror and fled in all directions. The heavy granite stone, still suspended by cables, shook violently as it fell, striking the posts and sending splinters flying. When the dust settled, everyone gasped in shock. Ibarra stood unharmed amid the wreckage, still holding his trowel. The massive stone had missed him by mere inches, and he stood surrounded by broken beams and shattered wood. At his feet lay the lifeless body of the yellowish man, half buried under the fallen timbers. "Ibarra, are you hurt?" cried one of the town officials, rushing forward. "I'm fine," Ibarra muttered, still in shock. "But he pointed to the yellowish man's body. The workers gathered around and lifted the corpse. Blood trickled from the man's ears and nose, and his neck bore strange, deep marks, as if he had been strangled by an invisible force. "A miracle! A miracle!" someone in the crowd shouted. Others took up the cry, attributing Ibarra's survival to divine intervention. The priests rushed to congratulate Ibarra, shaking his hand and praising God for his escape. Even Padre Salvi, though pale and trembling, offered his blessings. But as Ibarra looked around at the wreckage and the dead man at his feet, he couldn't help but wonder what dark force had truly been at work that day.